All right, Chelo. So we have the podcast already recording. Can you do me a favor and turn on the light on that little on air sign?
Where is it, on this side?
Yeah, just there's the button right there.
Did it go on?
No, press it. Press it. Oh, ahí va. Okay.
It's on?
Yeah, it's on.
Are you ready? Welcome to Hoy No Más Podcast with Angel Houseman.
How do you feel being on your first podcast, Chelo?
I don't know. I feel like if you were a detective and I was a criminal, I'm just getting interrogated.
Why?
I don't know.
All right, Chelo. So this is going to be our first podcast together. Do you feel nervous or not?
A little bit. I don't know.
Well,
I feel like I got used to not being in front of the camera for like the past couple months. Now I feel weird.
Yeah. Well, anyways, welcome back to another episode of Hoy No Más. Today we have a special guest, and it's my girlfriend Chelo, also known as Chelo Bean. So I've been wanting to record a podcast with Chelo just because for the longest, well, first of all, she came up with the name of the podcast.
Thanks to me.
Yeah. So I was trying to make the name of the podcast somewhat kind of relatable, but nothing too serious. You know, I didn't want like nothing to be too like motivational. I wanted to have fun with it. And how'd you come up with the name?
I don't know. I feel like it had to be something that related to you, but then I also knew that it wasn't. You didn't want something that was like too formal.
Yeah.
So, as you guys know, Angel always says "Hoy no más," or I feel like I pick up more on that because I'm always with you.
Yeah.
And I don't know. One day, like you were just saying it repeatedly, and I was like "Hoy no más," and then and then I was like, "Oh, that should be the name for the podcast."
Yeah.
And Angel kind of looked at me like, kind of weird, but then he's like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." So then, like days passed by, and then he's like, "You know what? That's what I'm gonna name the podcast."
Yeah, because I think the first couple names or whatever for the podcast, I wanted it to be like, I think like 413 or something like motivational. It was just like too much, and I just wanted to keep it like super, just fun. And Hoy No Más is kind of like when you hear something, I don't know, something like outrageous or something, it'll be like Hoy No Más, you know what I mean? So I really, really enjoy that name, and thank you, Chelo, for coming up with the podcast name. Cool. So Chelo, do you want to introduce yourself, a little bit of what you do, how we met, etc.?
I don't know. What do you want me to start first?
Okay, so first of all, were you born here in the U.S.?
No.
No? Okay, so...
Everybody thinks that I was born here, but I wasn't. I was born on the other side of the border. I was born in TJ. I went to school over there, like, for daycare up to, like, half of the semester of first grade. And then my dad fixed my mom's and I's papers. So we flew to Ciudad Juarez and we did all of that. And then we were forced to move over here.
So wait, so you were born in TJ and your parents...
Leslie was born in...
Wait, your parents were born in TJ as well?
No. My dad was born in Michoacan. My mom was born in TJ.
Okay.
I was born in TJ. And yeah, so I was born in TJ. Leslie, which is my younger sister, she was born over here in the States because it was just a different time frame. And my dad, I don't know why I wasn't born over here, but the point is I wasn't. And
wait, so your parents were already working in the U.S. and all that, or
no? So my parents were working over. My mom was working over there. My mom used to work for a middle school, and she used to do like accounting stuff.
But in TJ,
yes.
Okay.
TJ. And my dad used to work over here for a company that you already heard of that's called Busybody. Mm-hmm. And they did like gym equipment, and he used to like put it together and deliver it to the houses and then put it together and all that stuff.
Okay, so tenían visa? So
Me and my mom had visa.
Okay.
Leslie had her papers because she was a U.S. citizen, and my dad was a resident.
Gotcha.
And around this time frame, Leslie was born before the 9/11 thing, And then after the 9/11, I mean, I don't remember that much, but I just remember that the line situation just got kind of crazy, and my dad had to come over here to work every day. So I don't know what was how would I say it? Like the final straw for my parents to say, you know what, like we're gonna move over there. I don't know if it was a border situation or if my dad was kind of fed up with like crossing the line, or it was just a TJ thing. I haven't really asked them that, but I just know that like one day my dad was like, oh, we're gonna like fix your papers. And I remember when I was little, we used to like cross over here on the weekends, and we used to go a lot to Walmart. That's what I remember a lot.
But how does that work? So your parents, both of your parents were born down south, right? And so how were they able to fix your papers if they weren't citizens? How does that work?
Okay, so my dad was born down south. My dad was born in Michoacan, but he never lived there.
Okay.
And my dad was always bouncing like from different states in Mexico, and then he ended up in TJ because I don't know what. And he ended up in TJ, and when he ends up in TJ, he decides that he wants to come to the States.
Yeah.
So he crosses illegally through the cerro or whatever you want to call it, but I know in that time frame it wasn't as hard for him to cross. So he crossed, and he didn't stay in California. He went to live all the way to Washington State. So when he goes to live to Washington State, he starts working. And I guess back in that time, let's say if I was your employer and you were my employee, and if you didn't have papers, I was like, you know what, I'm going to give you a letter that states that I want you to work for me. But that letter will guarantee you to get papers. So that's how my dad ended up being a resident and getting his papers.
That's what I wanted to get to, because if I was like, what the hell? So if all of you guys didn't have papers, how the hell did you guys get papers? You know, so yeah. That's where I wanted to get to.
So my dad, they do all of that, and yeah, you can ask him about that later. But I know he does that, and that's how he gets his residency, and he works in Washington for the longest, and then he has one of his best friends from like the childhood. He is somewhat related to my mom because his wife was my mom's cousin.
Okay.
So my dad, keep in mind, my dad lived in Washington State, which is like, driving is like 24 hours. He would come down to TJ like once. So in Washington, they work for like half of the year because it's like the spring and fall time. And then once the winter hits, which would be right now that it snows, he would work for the city, so he would stop working. And then he would come he would literally get unemployment for 6 months, and he would just go like drive down, go to TJ, chill with his friends and do his thing. And then after that time frame was over, he would drive back up north and he would go back to work. So in one of those times that he would come down south, that's when he met my mom. But my mom was like, she was already in a relationship, so my dad knew that.
Yeah.
And he would always go over to Trini's house, and my grandma really liked my dad, but she didn't like.
Trini's your grandma, right?
Yeah, Trini is my grandma. My grandma really liked my dad, but she didn't like my mom's boyfriend.
Okay.
So after that, things fell apart with my mom and her boyfriend, and then my mom and my dad started talking. And I know that my dad, like, he will leave for months, so my mom would stay when they were already dating, my mom would stay in TJ and my dad would be working up north. And then once that like vacation time came over, then he would come back down, and that's the time frame that they started planning for the wedding and all that stuff.
Nice.
And yeah, and then my mom was already pregnant with me when she got married.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So at what age did you guys how old were you when you started like coming to school over here and all that?
Okay, so let's jump back to age 7.
Okay.
Because so my mom, okay, so we live in TJ. Leslie's the only one born over here because my mom had a visa so she could cross. So my dad paid Leslie's like delivery over here, and my mom and myself are the only ones without papers. My dad has his residency and Leslie is a U.S. citizen. So I go to school over there. Everything's fine. And we go to Ciudad Juarez. We get our papers. And, you know, like me, like I was 7, but I consciously knew that we were, like I was like, oh, we're going to get our papers and we're going to still have the same life. And then all of a sudden it was just kind of like, oh, you're leaving your home and you're leaving everything you know and you're going to somewhere else that you don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And I remember that, well, I was in the middle of first grade. I just knew Spanish. I knew some words because of English, because my dad would, like we would watch movies and he would be like, oh, this means that. But I wasn't fluent like I am right now. So we ended up moving over here, and we ended up living in this like little apartment, and Leslie and I used to like sleep together, and then my parents had their room, and we lived in that apartment up until I was 18.
And that's the one in Palomar?
Yeah, the one that I took is like a little ghetto apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we lived there. I come over here to school, and it's funny because when we were gonna come live over here, my grandma from my dad's, she was our neighbor, and I don't know why I was like, oh, I'm going over here, but in my mind I was like, okay, like I'm not going to school anymore, and I was like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna come live over here and I'm not gonna go to school. And she's like, what do you mean? Like you're going to school, but now it's like something different. And I was like, what? Like, there's school over there? Like, no, there's just school, like, over here in TJ. And she's like, no, like, over there you're going to go to school, but over there you're going to have to learn English and, like, do all these things that you don't know how to do. So I get to school. I used to go to this elementary school called Harborside that was, like, 2 blocks away from where we lived. And my class was a Spanish class, obviously, because I didn't know English. However, when in the morning I would get there and they would send me to an all English class to take attendance. And my teacher was gringa, so she didn't know any Spanish and I didn't know any English. So it's like, crap, like how are we going to communicate? And I remember that it was like I would go to that English class in the morning, and she would just take attendance, and then I would bounce back to my Spanish class for the rest of the day. But I hated going to school. Like, every morning was a fight with my mom because I didn't want to go to school because I was just, like, so... like, it was different for me. I didn't like it. And my mom... she always makes fun of me because in the mornings when she would always be, like, take me to school and stuff. And she would, like, we would form a line and the bell would ring and she would be like, okay, like, I'm gonna go right now. And once the bell rang, like, literally, I would, like, cry to my mom and I would tell her that my stomach was hurting just so I wouldn't stay in school and she would take me home. And she was like, nope, you're staying. And maybe it might have worked for a couple times, but that's how bad it was. Like, I would fucking cry to her and, like, be like, no, like, don't leave me here because I hated it. And that's how it went for like the end, like the second part of first grade. And then second grade comes around and my teacher was a Spanish teacher again, and she told my mom to put me in like this after school program, and it was called Stretch. And she's like, if you put her there, she's gonna get like va a agarrar el inglés rápido. So that's what my mom did, and I was just like, no, like, don't put me there. And she's like, no, it's fun, this and that. And I remember, like, school was over, like, at 3. And the program ended until 7, so it was, like, 4 hours.
Wow, damn, until 7?
And I remember that I would stay there for, like, the 4 hours, but I was with other kids that were in my same grade. So, like, my whole little class, let's say it was 20 of us, it was all, like, second graders. And there was a bunch of second graders that were bilingual, and then there was other ones that just spoke Spanish like me, and then other ones that just were like spoke English. So my teacher, her name was Miss Laura, and she only spoke English. So whenever I would like try to tell her something, like it was funny because I would try to tell her, like say something to her in English, and she wouldn't really understand me, so she would try to speak in Spanish to be like, oh, like you want this or you need that. And yeah, and then I was in that program for I think all second grade, and I don't remember if I went like years after that, but yeah, because of that program, that's how I got the English, even like lo entendí más rápido.
So, do you feel like you didn't like school over here because of the language barrier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was just like a culture shock because over there in TJ, like, I mean, you've never been to school in TJ or in Mexico, but we all wear uniforms. We all wear the same thing. Everybody goes to recess at the same time, even though if you're in different grade. At least the school that I went to, even if we were all in different grade levels. I used to do the what's it called? I forget. When you get la bandera and then you like marchas con la bandera and then you sing the himno. No, I used to do that over there. Like, I mean, I wasn't the main person, but I used to do that, so I feel like I was like more involved in school stuff. And then once I came over here, I was like, oh my god, like what is this? And it was just like a culture shock, the language barrier and all that I was just like, no, like I just want my friends from over there, and I want like my school from over there, and I want my teacher from over there. Like, not that the people from over here were bad, because they weren't, but it just made me really uncomfortable.
Did any like little kid ever make fun of you for like not knowing English or anything like that?
I don't know.
No?
I remember when I was in my Spanish class. Well, you know, like how it is when it's like, oh, we have a new kid, and like the teacher basically puts a spot, like you're on the spotlight. And I was like, great. And my first friend ever over here, her name was Itlali, and she lived like across the street from me. And then in my English class, that one that I'm telling you that they used to take attendance, there was kids in there that spoke Spanish. So they would help me, like the teacher would say something and they would translate for me in Spanish, and then I would say like the answer, and then they would translate for her in English. So then I ended up making friends in my Spanish class and my English class because of that.
Gotcha.
And yeah.
Yeah, for example, like I told Chris a while back, for me it was just like, I don't know, it's kind of intimidating when you don't really know the other language, right? Because I remember till this day, I think I mentioned the last time when I was talking to Chris on another podcast that I was trying to say a word, and they made fun of me because I didn't pronounce the word right. I think it was juice or choose, and I feel like I still have an accent maybe, but I said it with an accent, or I didn't say it correctly. Until this day, I freaking remember it, and it's just like, I don't know, it can be traumatizing, I guess you can say that. But it's something that, when you were saying that, something that I personally don't like, it's when, ya ves cuando alguien está hablando, like let's say if you see like a celebrity, a Mexican celebrity or somebody, or just anybody, right, that's talking in Spanish, or that's a Spanish speaker, Mexicano or whatnot, and then they're trying to talk English, y la hacen burla, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it,
Yeah,
but
it's like traes el nopal en la frente, but you're over here like
trying to talk English. However, if like let's say Will Smith or another like white or African American celebrity, they're trying to speak Spanish, our own people will be like, oh, sabes español, you know what I mean? They see it as kind of like, oh man, they embrace it, como dice, le aplauden, lo celebran. Pero un mexicano tratando de hablar inglés, le hacen burla, like, oh, mira, con el nopal, o como dijiste, you know. So I hate that. I really, really hate that. That que, hey, as Mexicans, a lot of us, we know both languages, and it's very rare that a white person or African American, whatever the case is, that they know both. But yet again, we're the ones that get made fun of, you know.
Yeah. So going back to that you said that right now, I feel like for me, it's still like my accents, I feel like it pops out at times. Like when I say a certain word. But a lot of the times when I say that to people, they're like they think that my first language is English. And I'm like, no, like, no se me escucha el acento, okay? And they're like, no. But I don't know. And I feel like for me, that was just like, for me, I feel like I'll always be grateful that my other little classmates kind of, like, they did help me because they would translate. So I feel like now, even growing up and now that I'm an adult, every time that somebody's struggling to say something in English, like, I'll step in and help, even though they're not even asking me for, because I know the struggle. And I know how it feel, like, I know how you feel, like, to try to, like, say something and then the other person not understand you, and it's just kind of frustrating. So that's happened to me a lot, like, just when I go out somewhere, or, like, even at work, or sometimes somebody will come up to me and be like, they'll start talking to me in English, and then I'm just there listening to me, and they're like, ¿hablas español? And I'll be like, yeah, sí. And then they're like, oh my God, qué bueno, like, you speak Spanish, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah.
Gotcha. All right, and pretty much, I guess now we can say fast forward to kind of like, or before I jump fast forwarding to how we met or anything, is there anything from your childhood or anything that you want to mention?
Not really.
Nah.
I don't like
So
that subject.
yeah, so pretty much, so okay, so fast forward, you pretty much left TJ, you came to school here, then how did we get in contact with each other?
Okay. So Angel and I are almost 10 years apart. I'm 25 right now. Angel's 34.
34.
Yeah, 34. He's gonna be 35. But back in the day, when I was in high school, I used to have a friend named Bibi. And Bibi used to go to the gym. And around that time frame that Bibi was going to the gym, I wasn't going to the gym anymore. And I remember, I don't know if it was like junior or... No, it wasn't senior year. I think it might have been like junior. I used to see Bibi that she would go to the gym, and then she would always take pictures like with her gym buddies, and then there was like guys and girls in those pictures. And I was like, okay, like whatever. So back in that time frame, that's when everybody used to use Facebook. And one time, like, I was like being chismosa, so she added like a couple pictures, and then that's when I saw Angel, and I was like, okay, whatever. And the first thing that I thought, I was like, oh, este pinche vato se mira bien presumido. That was the first thing that came to my mind. But I was like probably like 17.
Dang, you were 17?
I must have been that age. I don't know. Like, we were still in high school,
Yeah.
but I remember what grade this was in.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, este vato se mira muy presumido. He probably thinks like he's like this or that. So I didn't, like, after that I was like, okay, whatever. And time passed by, and then Angel sent me a friend request through Facebook, and I accepted him. And then I was like, wait, who's this person? So I started going through his pictures, and I was like, wait, he is Bibi's friend, one of the gym people that she goes with. So I was like, what? And then I was like, oh, that's the guy that looks like he's presumido. And I was like, okay, whatever. That was that. And at that time, I didn't have IG. I didn't have IG till like years later. But in that time frame that Angel sent me the friend request, like, I wasn't even, like, we would never talk. It was like, oh, I sent you a friend request, and that was it. And then time passed, like the years passed, and then I got on Instagram, and I remember that Angel started following me on Instagram, and I was like,
I did?
You started following me?
That I don't remember.
All
but
of a sudden.
like honestly, both of those about the friend request or anything, I don't remember any of that, but I'll take your word for it.
I was never sending friend requests to guys, so I just know it wasn't me.
Okay, well, it's probably me then.
Well, yeah, ¿quién más? So anyways, yeah, I get an IG. and I started uploading stuff. And then I remember Angel starts following me, and I was like, oh, it's this guy again. But I would never talk to Angel. Like, it was just kind of like he was there, but he wasn't there. So time passes by, and I used to go to walk to this park named Roar Park that's like not that far away from here. And I used to go walk at night with my sister, and I would always like post that I was there. And then one day Angel decides to send me a message, and he's like, oh, like, you like going to Roar Park? And by this time frame, I was like about to turn 21. And I was like, who the fuck is this? And then I go on his IG again, and I was like, oh, it's the same guy. And I replied to Angel, and I'm like, oh yeah, I come here with my sister, or sometimes I come by myself, blah blah. And he was like, oh, like, we should go sometime to like run or whatever to Roar Park. And I was like, okay, sure. That was it. Like, that was the end of that conversation. It wasn't like, oh yeah, like, come over, blah blah. I keep going to Roar Park, so I keep posting about it. And one day my sister, we would go around, probably like around this time. It was already dark. And one day my sister, like, she stopped going with me for like over a week. And I was just kind of over it. I was like, I'm not going to keep going by myself. And one day I was like, wait, Angel told me he wanted to like chill with me, to come with me to Roar Park one of these days. I'm like, I'm going to hit him up. So then I sent him a message, and I'm like, oh, like, I'm going to go to Roar Park tomorrow at 5. Like, do you want to like come walk or something? And then Angel replies back, and he's like, sure, like, why not? And the next day comes around, and I'm like, this guy probably just told me that he's gonna come, but he's not. So he's probably gonna bail like last minute, and I'm just gonna walk myself into my own little thing. And then Angel, like, he's like, oh, like, I guess he replied back, and he's like, oh, I'll see you later at 5. And I was like, oh shit, like, he is coming. And in that time frame, like, Angel used to drive a Cadillac. And
what?
The Cadillac.
Cadillac, yeah.
And just drive like a brand new Cadillac. And we go to, I get to Roar Park first. And I used to drive a Mini Cooper around that time. And I get to Roar Park, I get off the car, and I'm like standing by some trees, but I'm like looking around to see if I see him. And I already knew that he was driving this car because he would always post about this car like on his on his IG. And I'm like, I like look to my left to like the main entrance, and I see a black Cadillac just like slowly driving to the parking lot. And I'm like, oh shit, it's him. So I like turn around, like I turn my back around.
What the hell?
And then I'm like texting him, and I'm like, are you here? Like, are you sure you're here? Like, I don't see you, but I had already seen him.
Yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, like, I'm parking. And then I turned back around to see where Angel was. And then I see him getting off the car. So I'm like, oh shit. And then I turn around again. And I'm like, no, I still don't see you. And I was like, what are you wearing? Like, I think we asked each other, what are we wearing? And I remember I was wearing like a black sweater. And Angel, I just remember you were wearing one of those Nikes that are like fosforescentes. Like, they were like red or orange. Red. Orange. I don't know. That's everything I remember. And I was like, shit. Like, I was nervous. And then he's like, oh, I think I see you. And I was like, oh my God. So he comes over and he's
what do you mean, oh my God? If you told me to go.
But I just didn't think you were gonna make it.
Yeah.
And plus around, like, it was just like the time frame that we met each other. Like, I was just like, I would just hang out with my girlfriends. It wasn't like I would go on dates or hang out with guys. So I don't know. It was just kind of like, like, I want to hang out with him, but, like, no.
Yeah.
So, Angel comes around, and he's like, oh, hi, like, soy Angel, or what. I don't remember what he said. So, he comes around, and this dude gives me a hug, and it was, like, the freaking... No, espérate, like...
What's wrong with a hug?
You literally went, like, oh, hi, how are you?
What the... Oh, like awkward or...
Yeah, but... And I was, like... And I remember I was like, what the fuck? What was that hug for? And I was like, oh, hi. I did the same thing back to him. And then he was like, oh, like, do you want to start walking? Like, you asked me what way would I usually walk. So we walked that way, and then we were like talking for like that whole like walk around the park. You have anything else to say?
No.
So we're walking and whatnot. And keep in mind, like, my dad works where Angel works. But my dad has been working there for like 20-something years. And I knew Angel worked there too, but I didn't know for how long. So we're walking, and Angel's making me all these questions, right? And at one point, he's like, oh, like, what do your parents do for a living? And I was like, oh, my mom works for, like, the healthcare, like, department, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, well, what does your dad do? And I'm like, oh, my dad works for NASCO. And then Angel looks at me. He's like, your dad works at NASCO? And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, fuck, no, they're going to know each other. They're going to be friends. And I'm like, yeah. And then he's like, what does he do at work? And I was like, honestly, I don't know, like, his position. I just know he works there. That's it. And Angel's like, oh, like, I don't know. He just kept asking me a bunch of questions about my dad. And I was like, oh, let me look for a picture of him. And I'm, like, scrolling through my phone. And I'm, like, trying to look for a picture of my dad. And I'm, like, praying to God that Angel tells me he doesn't know him. Because I'm, like, shit, like, this is going to be so weird. And I find a picture of my dad and myself, and I show it to Angel, and Angel grabs my phone like this, and he's like zooming into it, and he's like, oh my God, I know him. And when he says that, I'm like,
I didn't say it like that. Oh my God. Nah.
But you're like, that you knew him.
But you make me sound like, oh my God.
But okay, whatever. He says like, que lo conoce. And I'm like, okay, great. And then Angel starts mentioning all these like names of other coworkers that he knows. And when he starts saying that, I'm like, he's not lying, because I know, like, I've heard those names before from my dad, like his coworkers, nicknames and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, like, now this is gonna be weird.
Yeah.
So we finish walking, and I go home, he goes home, and then I don't remember if, like, we talked the next day, or I know we didn't, like, hang out we didn't hang out, like, in a while after that. But then I don't remember, like, where we went to on our first date.
Yeah. So just wanted to jump back. So I knew your dad from como de vista, and I knew what his position was and everything, but I never really dealt with him, just because, keep in mind, well, NASCO, it's a big company.
Yeah.
You know, it has thousands of employees. So I never worked with him like face to face or anything like that, but I know he had seen me and I had seen him and probably said hi or whatever. But we didn't really like know or fully work together, you know, but yeah, we had seen each other for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot to mention that part, but yeah, I remember you. That's what you told me. You were like, I know him, and you told me this on the first time I showed you the picture, like, I know him de vista, but I'm not friends with him.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, but it's still weird. So yeah, that we finished like walking and whatnot, and then I go home, Angel goes home, and then that was pretty much how the first time we met went.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought. I was gonna say fuck, what was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought. So how Okay, so that happened, and then what else? After Roar Park, like, time passed by. Did we continue talking?
I know time passed by, but like when I first met Angel, I'm like, oh, he seems like a cool, nice guy. But it wasn't like, oh, I like Angel, or I want to be in a relationship with Angel, because I had just gotten out of a toxic ass relationship, so I didn't want to deal with somebody else. So time passes by, and I remember we ended up, when I turned 21, we ended up going to that brewery spot, Ballast Point.
Oh yeah, Ballast Point. Yeah.
But I don't remember if between Roar Park and Ballast Point we hanged out again, like a couple more times, or if it was Roar Park and then Ballast Point.
Yeah, I think it was that. I don't think we hung out anytime before that. At least not that I remember, but for sure I remember Ballast Point. We hung out for your birthday.
Yeah, because that's when I had just turned 21 because I can legally drink over here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was Ballast Point. Yeah, I think that's what it might have been. I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah. So when was it that... Okay, so that happened, right? That was like our first encounter, right? And then did we start dating right after that? Do you want to go into like how we started dating, or the first time I met your parents? Or how did that happen? Tell the people.
Do you want me to tell them about your birthday thing? Oh, let me tell you guys one thing. Angel told me he lied about his age. Because when we were like talking to each other, like I think it was when Roar Park or through text message, I asked him how old he was because he obviously looked older than me. And he was like, oh, I'm 20. I think he told me 26 or 27. And I was 20 at that time. And I was like, okay, 7 years is not that bad. And then after I turned 21, we kept hanging out. And then Angel's birthday came around in April. And all of a sudden, I remember that's when you were looking for a grupo for your birthday.
Yeah.
And then Angel, like, he did, like, this IG story. And he was like, oh, I'm looking for a grupo for my 30th birthday. And I'm like, what the fuck? What do you mean you're going to be 30? You told me you were 27. And I'm like, oh, shit. Like, this guy is older. Like, he was, like, I already felt like it was like, okay, like, 7 years is not that bad. But it's like now we're almost talking about almost 10 years. And I was like, damn, like he's going to be 30. So I remember that day, and like Angel was like, oh, I'm going to have a birthday party for my 30th birthday, blah, blah, blah. Like you should come over. But around that time frame, like I used to go a lot to TJ and stuff. Like not every weekend, but maybe every other weekend. And I remember that I had a salida with my friends for that specific day that it was Angel's birthday. And Angel was like, oh, like, you should come and, like, stop by and, like, say hi and whatnot. And I remember you even told me, you were like, oh, if you want to bring your friends over. And I was like, no, like, my friends don't even know you and I hardly even know you. So why am I going to bring my friends? And for a couple of days, I was undecisive. I'm like, oh, like, should I even, like, go or should I not go? Or should I just go and say hi and then leave to TJ? And I remember, like, that same day, I made up my mind and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go and say hi and say happy birthday and I'm going to go to TJ. So I come over and Angel's like, oh, like to come to the party. And I was like, no, like, I don't want to go to the party. Like, meet me outside. Like, I'll just say hi and, like, we can talk for a little bit and then I'll go. So Angel comes outside and he was wearing like, I don't even know if you still have that shirt. It was like como una shirt que tenía como unas pockets aquí or una little pocket aquí. And it was kind of like burgundy.
Fuck, I don't even remember.
Y era como de botones. I think that's what you were wearing if I'm not wrong. Angel comes outside and I'm like, oh, happy birthday, blah, blah, blah. And then I was making fun of him because I was like, oh, like, why didn't you tell me you were going to be 30? And I remember Angel said, like, oh, I didn't want to tell you my real age because you weren't going to like me or something like that. He said something along those lines and he's like, oh, my God. We're talking outside and I think by this point, like, I knew that Angel was, like, attracted to me, but not like, oh, like, I want to date you, you know, like, como que le gustaba, but it was just, like, kind of like that was it.
Wait, what do you mean? That I liked you or that you liked me? What do you mean?
No, like yo sabía que you like were attracted to me, but I felt
that I liked you.
Yes.
Okay.
And porque like of the way you would like tell me things, and I was just kind of like okay, whatever. Like I would just ignore it. And I say hi to Angel. We were out there talking for a while. And I remember Angel tells me... Do you remember what you told me?
No.
All of a sudden...
What'd I say?
Angel never freaking remembers anything, I swear. we were talking, and I remember that's when you told me like, oh, I really like you, but like if you're not ready for like a relationship or something like that, you know, like it's fine. And we're talking about this, and Angel's like, he tells me, he's like, I know you're talking to somebody else, but I know that that person can't offer you what I can offer you. And then he says, what else did you say? Oh, you say like, si tú un día te estás conmigo, a ti nunca te va a faltar nada. And that's like that little conversation we had that day, like that's been like in the back of my head ever since.
That's crazy that you remember that, because I remember that conversation, and I remember seeing those IG stories and things like that. But yeah, that's crazy that I said that. And to be honest with you, that's kind of one of my, I think it's just one of my beliefs that kind of like as a man, not being a machista or anything like that, because I'm not, all right? Yeah. But I feel like as a man, I feel like, you know what, I'm the provider. I'm going to be like looking out for you. That's why I said that. And just wanted to make sure that, hey, you know what, I'm going to be looking out for you.
And you are.
Yeah. So far. Yeah. So have I kept my word so far?
Yeah. He's always kept his word.
Yeah. So, okay. So that happened. And then did we start dating right after that, or?
No. So, that happened. And then, I used to like, you know, I had like my little group of friends that I would go to TJ with. And, they knew like my past relationships and all of that. And then one day I mentioned you, like time passes and I mentioned you, and they're like, oh, like here we go again, like esta pendeja va con otro way, like, because they were used to me being in toxic relationships. So it's just like, oh, here we go again with some other guy. And I was like, no, like this one's different, blah blah blah. And they're like, nah, we don't believe you. So one day I'm talking to my best guy friend, that you know him, El Norberto, the one we went to his baby shower. I'm talking to him and I'm like, oh, like there's this guy que me tira el rollo, but I don't know because he's older than me. And then he was like, well, like tell me the chisme. So we're like talking about it, and then he's like, well, because at this point I had never dated somebody older than me. Like I would always be the older one, and then everybody else that I would date was like younger, like not like years younger, but like a year. And he was like, well, like, no, like, I no tenía nada que perder. Like, what if I didn't work out? Like, we could just break up and then that was it. And then I mentioned, like, oh, like, but he works with my dad. And that was, like, a big thing for me. And then he's like, oh, shit, he works with your dad? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, and what do you think your dad's going to say about that? And I was like, well, I'm not going to tell him. And then he's like, no, but you know, like, how people are at work. Like, if he tells somebody, it's like, se corre el chisme kind of thing. And he's like, so what do you think your dad's going to say or think about you because you're basically dating his coworker? And I'm like, I don't know. And at this point, my dad was really, like, on me because mi papá era bien celoso. And he didn't like anybody. So I was like, dude, if he don't like anybody and he'll like ignore them, and even when I would like try to tell him something, like to convince him for something, he'll be like, no. And I'm like, what is he gonna say about something that's like somebody that's like almost 10 years older than me, and aparte, like it's like almost his coworker, like me va a dar una patada, like, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like I don't know what to do. So then that was a conversation with my best guy friend. And then I go to my other friend, Fernanda, the one that I was with on Friday. And I was like, I tell her the same storyline. And she's like, dude, pues just go for it. Like, you're not going to lose anything. And I'm like, yeah, but then this is what's stopping me. And then she's like, don't even care about what your dad says. But at that time in life, I felt like, and not that I don't right now, right? But I felt like like me going against what my dad said. Well, in a way, because I would do a lot of stuff that he would still get mad at me for. But in that time frame, for me, como revelármele to that point, I feel like I wasn't confident enough to be like, I'm gonna do whatever I want, and I don't care about whatever you think. So she's like, dude, like, just give him a shot, and if it the same thing Alberto told me, like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I was like, no, it's because it's his I feel like for me, what kept stopping me was the coworker thing. And yeah, even my other girlfriends were like, oh, like, you know, like no tienes nada que perder, but it's like, you gotta think about what you're gonna do if your dad. If you don't tell your dad, then that's one thing. But then if he finds out, like, out of nowhere, he's gonna trip out on you. So for the longest, I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna be friends with Angel, but I'm not gonna date him because of the whole that situation. So I wanna say after I turned 21. Angel and I, we were talking to each other for like, I think we were like talking to each other for like a good year. Because, yeah, we were talking to each other for like a good year. So, okay, we go to the Vallis point. I'm 21 already. And we would hang out, but it wasn't like an everyday or every weekend hangout. It was just kind of like, oh, we would hang out de vez en cuando, like every other month. And we would hang out every other month. And then we stopped talking. Well, I stopped talking to Angel for a while. And I think we went like 2 or 3 months without talking to each other. And then we started talking to each other again. And when we started talking to each other again, that's when we started like constantly like hanging out. It was like an every weekend, like we would go here, we would go there. So I want to say that, I don't know, like we were probably like talking every day for like a good, probably like, I don't know, like 7-8 months. So yeah, do you have anything else to comment about that?
Yeah, but okay, so that happened, and then so that happened, right? And did we start dating like right after, or?
So, okay, so Angel, like, I felt like there was, like, some type of communication because Angel was, like, he would, like, bring up the topic of us being, like, official, and I would just push it off. And I was like, no, like, let's just be friends and let's just stay how we are. And then he was like, okay, like, if that's what you want, then fine. And,
yeah, because at that point, I think I asked you, hey, do you want to have a relationship? Would you rather have, like, be friends, right? And you told me, oh, let's just be friends, or, like, let's just be friends. Yeah. And for me, I was like, all right, cool. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, well, I'm like, all right, if that's what you're cool, I'm with it, you know? So we were friends, and we kept it like that. But then after that, I feel like got to a point, like you said, that we were hanging out back and forth, that it was getting to a point that I knew that now you wanted a relationship at that point.
I feel like for me, when you asked me that, it was kind of like to put me in the spot, and I was like, shit, like, I don't want to say, yeah, I want to jump into a relationship, and then Angel's not ready, and then you're kind of like, now you're like, oh, I have to tell her, like, ask her out, because now, like, she's telling me que sí. So for me at that point, I was like, oh, like, if Angel really wanted to, then, or if he was ready, like, to me in my head, I was like, if Angel was ready, he would just do it. He wouldn't just be asking me. And when you asked me that, I remember I said that, and then you were like, okay, like, if that's what you want, let's just stay like that. And then days later, I talked to my friend Karen, and we were talking about this. And she's like, oh, like, what happened with Angel? Like, they all knew Angel was, like, the Cadillac, the guy with the Cadillac. And she's like, oh, what happened with the guy, what happened with the guy in the Cadillac? And I'm like, oh, like, we were talking about this the other day, but I told him this. And she was like, Like, why are you playing yourself dumb when you know you do have feelings for him? And I was like, no, I don't. Like, I was still trying to play it off, and I was like, no, I don't have feelings for him. And she's like, yeah, like, why are you playing yourself stupid? Because you know you do. You're just trying to keep your, like, guard up, but you know you do have feelings for him. And I was like, well, we'll see how things go. And then time passes by again, and it gets to the point, well, at this point I'm already living by myself in TJ because I moved out over there when I was 21.
Oh yeah, that's right. You were living at your parents and then you moved to TJ by yourself, right?
Yeah, so there comes a time where I'm like, you know what, like, I do not care what my mom and my dad says. Like, I really don't care. So I decide that I want to go live to TJ. Like, I decide I want to go live by myself, but I know I couldn't afford rent over here, so I had to go live to TJ. So I went to live to TJ for like it was like almost 2 years that I was out there by myself. Well, I mean, I would cross over here, but that I was living by myself.
It was almost 2 years?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yep.
Okay. So when I first met your parents, were we dating already or no?
You mean in the hospital?
Yeah. Were
No.
we no, right?
We weren't.
Oh, okay.
We weren't.
So how did that come about?
Okay, so I don't know if you want to go into the brain surgery thing first and then go into that.
Oh yeah, exactly. So,
Okay, so
because at that point you were living in TJ and you were crossing to San Diego.
okay, so I ended up getting a brain surgery.
No, but you were crossing to San Diego.
Oh, okay, like the storyline?
Yeah.
Okay, so I lived in TJ and I used to come to school over here. And then at that point, I was doing like my own business thing. So I was working my own hours. And I would cross every day in the morning. And I remember by this point, Angel and I were talking to each other like every day now. And we're on the phone. And I used to go to the gym. And I would tell Angel like, oh, call me every day at 5 to wake me up. And then he would call me. He would wake me up. I would get up. I would change into like gym stuff. I would cross the border, go to the gym for like an hour, and then take a shower, go to school, and then go to work. And that day, Angel called me, and I remember like I was just feeling under the weather. He called me. He's like, "Oh, are you gonna go to the gym?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." We clicked, and I go back to sleep. I go back to sleep. I was thinking I had put the alarm on, and I didn't. So I literally just woke up like, sí, como si alguien me hubiera despertado. Like I woke up kind of like with a panic. I wake up, I'm like, oh shit, what time it is? And it was already 7ish. Like it was like 7:30. And for me to get out of my house by that time, I was gonna hit traffic for like 30-40 minutes just to get to the border, not counting the linea. And I'm like, oh shoot, like there's gonna be a bunch of line, like there's gonna be traffic and there's gonna be line. So I get up, I change, like, I remember I was wearing, like, a sports bra, some leggings, and I had, like, a pink robe on me, like a sleeping robe. And I grab a bag of stuff, and I just throw a bunch of stuff in there, and I get in the car. When I get in the car and I start driving, there's no traffic, so I got pretty quick to the border. But on my way from the house to the border, I was listening to music, and I couldn't stand my head. Like, my head was hurting so bad that I felt like they were drilling to like in my like the side of my head. And I was like, oh, like it's just probably like I'm dehydrated, or I don't know. Like that's the first thing that I thought. I get to the border, and as soon as I get to the sentry, I start feeling nauseous. So now it's just not my headache, but I start feeling nauseous. So at this point I wanted to throw up, and I was like buckled in the seat, and I'm like, where am I gonna throw up? There was a trash can, but I would have to get off the car and run. And I remember I just took off the robe, and I just threw up on the robe, and I just threw it on the passenger side on the floor. There was no line either in the sentry, so it was literally like no traffic to the sentry, no line at the sentry. I get to the CBP, I give him my stuff, he lets me go. I keep driving. I don't have the music on because my head was still like it was literally felt like they were drilling the side of my head. And I still feel nauseous and I feel dizzy now. So I crossed the border. I'm driving on the freeway. I'm feeling all of this. I'm like, what's going on with me? Because I've never felt this before. And when I threw up, I thought that it was like some tacos that I had ate the night before que me hicieron daño. But I'm like, why am I feeling nauseous, dizzy, and vomiting? So I'm driving on the freeway on the 905, and there's this point where I remember I was driving, and I remember in the, like, así, that a bunch of cars were honking at me. And the only reason, like, I'm pretty sure at that point I was already swerving, because why else would they be honking at me? And I remember that I was driving, but I couldn't stay, like, I was pisando, like, the bolitas on the floor. And I pulled to the side, and I keep throwing up. Like, the throw up doesn't stop. I keep throwing up. And I'm, like, on the side of the freaking freeway crying my ass off. And at that point, the pain was so bad. I feel like I have a tolerance for pain, but at that point, the pain felt so bad that I feel like I was going to call 911 to get, like, an ambulance. But I'm like, they're going to be like, this girl just, like, she's just freaking throwing up. Like, why are we going to help? Like, I don't know. That was the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, no, I'm just going to drive to my mom's. So that drive from there to my mom's is like a 20-minute drive. So I'm, like, in the side of the road crying my ass off. And I was like, God, like, please just let me get to my mom's. And then, like, just let me get to my mom's, and that's it. So I drive to my mom's. I get to my mom's. I pull up to the driveway. I get off. I keep throwing up on the driveway. I go inside. My sister's there, and she's like, ¿Qué te pasó? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, my stomach, like, I feel weird. And I go in and I throw, like, the throw up is just like that. So she's like, oh, acuéstate. And I was like, no, but I have class right now and I have a test. Like, it was like a midterm or something like that. And she's like, acuéstate ahorita, like, you can take a shower right now. So I laid down, and I think I fell asleep. And by the time I woke up, like, my class had restarted, and I'm, like, in panic mode, because I'm like, dude, I have a test. Like, I need to go take it, but I still feel like shit, and I can't drive. And by that point, my mom's home already. And she's home, and she sees me, and she's like, ¿Qué tienes? So I tell her the same thing. And she's like, I'm going to take you to urgent care. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. Like, se me va a quitar, like, just let me stay, like, ahorita se me quita. And she's like, no, I'm gonna take you. So she takes me. I get to urgent care. This is like around the afternoon, so it's been a couple hours. And I get there, and they take me into the room. They do a couple tests, and then they tell me that I had a UTI. They gave me medication for a UTI, and they discharged me. But my headache never hurt. Like, the headache never stops. So the only way I could be was, like, if I was laying down flat, like, in the bed. If I tried to, like, do this, levantarme or sentarme, I couldn't, because my head was just felt like it was gonna explode. So they sent, like, they're like, you're good to go. And then I told my mom, see, like, you didn't even have to bring me because it wasn't that big of a deal, blah blah blah. And she's like, you know what, you're gonna stay the night here, and then if you feel better tomorrow, you can go to your house tomorrow. And I got mad at her, and I'm like, no, like, I'm gonna go home tonight, that day that they discharged me. And she's like, no, you're gonna stay here because quiero ver que estés bien. So I stayed the night right there. The next day I had to go to work, and I was feeling worse than the first day. And my mom was like, you're not going to work. Like, she was trained to do what I did, so she went to work for me. And she came back, and that day, like, at this point, I hadn't ate anything. Everything that I would eat it, I would throw it up. Even if it was water or juice or anything like that, I would throw it up. So my mom comes back, and she sees me, and remember she tells me, like, that I look pale. And she's like, you know what, I'm gonna take you to the ER. And I'm like, like, okay, take me. She takes me to the ER, and my mom tells the nurses, like, oh, like, we went to urgent care the day before. They told her she had a UTI, but she has this weird headache that won't go away. And the doctor was like, you know what, like, let me they had told me first that they thought it was like something called meningitis, which I don't really know what it is. But he's like, let me see if that's what it is. So we're going to do like, donde te meten el tubo, an MRI. So they do an MRI, and I'm just chilling in the room, and I'm telling my mom, see, it's not going to be nothing bad. Like, it's fine. Like, maybe it's like I got sick for something I ate. They come back with the results, and the doctor was like, you're not getting out of the hospital anymore. And he tells my parents and myself that I had, like, they call it an AVM, which it's short for arteriovenous malformation. So basically what that is, it's like a knot between your arteries and your veins. So it's como si tuvieras un nudo así grande. But I didn't just have that. I had a bleeding within that. So the doctor says that in the brain, like your skull, like there's just space for the brain. So my brain, because of that thing that I had, it was swollen. So it was making my head just wanted to explode. Like my head literally felt like it was going to explode. So that's why it was causing that much pain. And he's like, you're not getting out of here. And I was like, in my head, like I was like, no, like that's not me. Like that's not my paperwork. That's somebody else's. And he's like, no, that's you. So from there, we were at, what hospital were we in? We were at Zion in the ER. From there, I remember when I was little, I used to be like, oh, I always want to get in an ambulance. And then that day se me cumplió because I got transferred from that hospital to the other hospital in the ambulance. So within hours, I get transferred from Zion to the hospital that I was in. And the doctor tells me like, oh, you have to get transferred to a different hospital because if something were to happen to you, like to the point that you're literally like I was literally life or death at that point already. But if you get worse, like the doctors that are the neurologists are in that actual like hospital. So at this point, I'm like, okay, like what's going on? Am I just going to be like here getting checked, or am I going to be here permanently? Like what's going on? So I get admitted to the new hospital, and I'm in the ICU unit for over, I think it was like 16 days. It was more than 2 weeks, but less than 3 weeks. I think it was 16 days. I'm in the ICU. They have me on all kinds of pills every day. Then they come in and tell me that I have two options. I have either surgery or brain surgery or radiation. So at all this time that I'm in the hospital, I'm always conscious. I'm always talking. Like I never passed out. So I always knew what was going on. Like I just felt like crap. And like when they tell me like, oh, it's surgery or radiation, that's when it really hit me. I was like, oh damn, like this is serious, because like it's just too much. I'm in there, and I remember that for me, like if I had to walk, like if I had to get from one point to another, like they would just rather like bring the stuff to me than to me walk. So I'm like laying down for a couple of days. Then the day that they're like, you can like get up and do something, I have to use a walker, because I couldn't walk by myself like that. I had to use a walker. And then I go a couple of days without freaking taking a shower. So they had to give me a bed bath. And I think my mom was the one that gave me like a bed bath. I don't remember. And I was just like, oh my God, like what is this? I'm like, is this going to be like my everyday thing? Because I don't want this.
So at that point, were you feeling still sick? Or were you like como están exagerando? Or are they like making things sound worse than it is? Or you were actually feeling sick still?
So at this point, the vomiting stops. The dizziness keeps going.
Okay.
The headaches never stop. For the 16 days, the headaches never stop. So at this point, the thing that hurts the most is the headaches. The headaches never stop. So they have me on all these kinds of medications. And
it was 16 days?
Yeah, I was 16 days in the ICU.
Wow, I don't remember being that long.
Yeah, I was 16 days.
Oh, okay.
So it was 16 days. And I remember my mom, she says that I never, ¿cómo se dice? Like, I was very alert. So they weren't, like, it wasn't like, oh my God, like, she's just going to pass out, like, at one point. Like, I was very, like, I knew what was going on. And the doctors would come in, like, every other hour and be like, what's your name? Where were you born? What's this? Like, they just wanted to make sure that I was still, like, you know, like,
aware of who you were. And
because that was another thing too, that people that get those things, they start forgetting stuff, or they just, you know, they don't react to anything anymore. So I'm there, and I remember my mom, like, now that I'm not I'm not there anymore, she says that my face, like, one side of my face started getting droopy. So, like, como que un lado de la cara se me empezó a checar. I don't remember that because I was always laying down in bed. And so the doctors are like, you have two options. You have the brain surgery or the radiation. The brain surgery was, they're going to open me up, do whatever they have to do, and that's it. But I could bleed out and I can die. Or I could get radiation, and it's not as risky as the brain surgery, but it's just, it had a 70% that it was going to work. And then the 30, it could come back. And the doctors are asking me all these questions. And like, when they tell me that, I'm like, the first time they asked me, they're like, oh, you know, like, think about it. And I was like, I'm not gonna think about it, like, just do surgery on me.
Well, why'd you decide on surgery over the radiation? Because
the radiation, it's kind of like, my mom said it's something like related to chemo, so it like affects you in the long run. Huh? And my mom was like, no, like, I don't want you to get that. But then she was also worried for the brain surgery because it was like a 50-50. And she's like, but at the end of the day, since I was conscious, I was going to make the last decision even if they didn't agree to it. So I was like, no, I'm going to get the brain surgery. Like, I'm not going to say I wasn't scared because I was. But at least for me, it was like, I'm not going to, like, nobody knows what those headaches feel like. So I'm not going to risk myself to go through, like, radiation and then still have, like, the aftermath of that. And then that thing not working and getting the headaches back. I was like, I'm not dealing with that. I was like, I'd rather die trying to fix the situation. And then if it goes good, it goes good. And if it doesn't, well, it doesn't. But I'm like, I'm not dealing with these headaches anymore. So that's how that day went. And they didn't want to do surgery on me right away. They wanted me to wait. So I remember that I ended up in the hospital like September 26 or 27. And I'm there for, we're in October already. And they wanted me to get discharged, go home. And then I was going to go back to the hospital by the end of October to get surgery and then get discharged again. And my mom didn't want that. So one day I was eating like oatmeal or something, and I was sitting down in the bed. And I hadn't thrown up in the last time that I had thrown up was before I got to the hospital, when it first started. So I was eating something, I throw it up, and they do like rápido me metieron al tubo, and they did all of these things, and they're like, you need to get surgery like right now. So my mom was glad in a way because she's like, oh, like, I guess that's what they needed to see, to be like, she needs it right now, other than like to extend it for a whole month and then come back and get it. So yeah, like, let's say I threw up today and they're like, pa pasado mañana te operamos. It was like that. It was fast. So surgery, before surgery, I got like, in order to do the surgery, they do other procedures, they don't just jump right into the surgery. So they had to do like 2 incisions, like right here on the sides. And they run like a little camarita all the way up to your brain. And they throw like it releases like an ink, and that ink will say where the issue is. And they had to do that twice before they did the surgery. So they did that twice. Every day they would do blood work. So I don't have them anymore, but I had them for a couple months. Like I had like todos los marcas de los piquetes on the hands. And every day they would do blood work. Every other day they would do like MRIs and CT scans. They had me on a bunch of medications. So I was like constipated for the longest. And I was on narco for the longest too, because as soon as I would get a headache, they would give me one of those pills. And I caught on to it that I was almost getting addicted to the pill, because it was like, let's say my pain level was a 5. I was like, give me a pill already, even though it wasn't as bad. And one day a nurse comes in. It was like a night shift nurse. She's like, oh, do you want you want Norco or you want a Tylenol? And I looked at her and I'm like, why is Tylenol gonna do to me? Like, it's not gonna do anything. And she's like, no, it's gonna do the same thing, but it's just gonna take a little bit longer than the Norco. And I was like, okay, give me a Tylenol. Y ya, se me quitó. So my older sister flew from Washington down here, and she told me like, oh, like the Norco pills are expensive. And she's like, I don't remember what she said. She said something else about them, but she's like, oh, those pills are really expensive if we're going to be taking them like on a regular, like a day-to-day thing. So then I was like, you know what? I need to stop myself from taking them, because I knew that at times the pain wasn't as bad, but I just wanted the pill. So then that's when I was like, you know what? I'm going to just try taking Tylenol. So I started taking Tylenol. And that's how I like caught onto myself and stopped myself to stop taking the Norco. And yeah, the Tylenol did the same effect. They just take a little bit longer. Like the day of the surgery comes around. The nurses were like super, super nice. Well, you met them. And, like everybody would always tell me like, this is something that older people tend to get like in their 40s, not somebody that's young like you. Because at that point I was 22. And they're like, oh, like you're going to make it. You're going to be fine. You're going to have a normal life. So surgery day comes around. And
For this, sorry to cut you off. For this surgery, you said it's like I forget the percentage, right? But it's a pretty dangerous surgery, right?
I think it's like a 60-40 or a 70-30. But okay. The less percentage of you making it at, like, you surviving the surgery. Surgery day comes around, and, like days before, the nurses are hyping me up. They're like, you're going to be fine. Nothing's going to be bad. Like, you're going to make it. Like, just wait and see. And surgery day comes around. It's like, I don't know, I want to say like 4 or 5 in the morning. It was still dark outside. And the nurse comes in, and he's like, okay, like I'm going to take you to I think he was going to take me to the basement. And my mom and my dad were in the room. And, well, no, my dad was in the room. My mom had just gone to the restroom. So she wasn't there when the nurse got there. Or I don't know if she stepped out because she didn't want to see when they take me. And the nurse was like, he asked my dad, like, oh, do you want to, because they were going to take me to the basement and prepare me, but I wasn't going to go to surgery right away. I still had like an hour or two to wait. And the nurse was like, oh, he asked my dad, do you want to go downstairs with her just to chill with her and then say your goodbye, and then she goes into surgery and you go upstairs? And my dad was like, no. But and then he asked me like, oh, do you want him to go? And I'm like, no. And then the nurse, I don't know if the nurse was like, oh, that's weird, or I don't know. But I'm like, no, I don't want him to go. So my dad, I don't even remember my dad said bye or he just stayed there. The nurse rolls me out of the room. And there's like, I feel like I want to cry.
It's okay, babe.
It's
It's okay, babe.
I don't know where my makeup.
No, it's okay, babe.
He rolls me out in the chair, and I mean, yeah, he actually rolls me out in a wheelchair. He rolls me out in the wheelchair, and he's quiet and I'm quiet, and I just remember we were like on a straight hallway, and the hallway was like a yellow color, and I'm seeing like all the nurses, the patients, like everything that's going on, and I'm like paying attention because I'm like shit, like what if this is the last thing I ever see? So at that point I just felt like, you know, sometimes, I don't know, you go to the grocery store and you just pass the same aisle, or you go to work and you do the same commute, and you don't really care because it's like, oh, it's like an everyday thing, like whatever. But at that point you're like fuck, like this is it. And even before that I was like, fuck, like it really, like, until a person is in an experience like that, that's when you're like, oh, like the small things that you do every day, like they matter. Because at that point everything I wanted, it was like, oh, I just want to go home and take a shower, because I couldn't even take a shower. Or like, oh, like I want to be stuck in traffic, or oh, I want to be doing the things that we usually complain about, that we're like, oh, this thing is so annoying, I don't want to do it. At that point, everything you want to do is the things that bug you on the daily, because you don't know if you're ever gonna do them again. And he rolls me down. We're on the elevator. I'm paying attention to all of this, and he's quiet and I'm quiet. I'm not saying anything. I'm not crying either at that point. And then I'm like, you need to fucking snap out of it, because you're gonna make it. Because at this point I'm like, oh shit, like I'm gonna die. And I feel like it was making me feel worse than what I felt. So when we're on the elevator, he's like, you know, you're pretty young and you're very healthy and you're gonna make it out of this, and you're just, and one day you're just gonna be like, kind of like laughing about it, like telling your story. And at this point, you know, like I kind of laughed, but it was like a nervous laugh. I go downstairs. There's a bunch of nurses downstairs. They are like doing all these procedures on me. They lay me on the bed, and I remember like I was very, very cold, and they put like a bunch of blankets on me. I waited probably like an hour there, and that's when I get taken to the surgery room, and I get taken there. Everything's fine. At this point, I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna make it. Everything's gonna be fine. Like, don't panic. When I was in, when I was waiting for me to get in that bed, waiting to get transferred to the operating room, I remember I was just praying to my grandpa, and I was like, dude, like I don't want to go yet. And they come and get me, take me to the operating room. They transfer me to the operating table, which was freaking cold. And I remember I'm laying down flat. I'm laying down flat, and I see a ring light, which is like the operating room ring light. And it literally, in a flash, it takes me back. I used to dream a specific dream a lot back in the day. I used to dream of me dying in an operating room, and I could see myself like laying in a bed with the ring light. It's like the table, the ring light, I see myself dead, but myself, I'm standing from a far point. And that comes to my mind as soon as I see the ring light, because I'm laying down underneath it. And I'm like, oh shit, like I am gonna die. And the nurse is making conversations with me, and I'm like, no, stop, snap out of it. You're gonna make it like how you've made it, like through anything else. So the nurse gives me a mask, which I didn't know was oxygen. She gives me the mask, and she's like, I'm talking to her, she's talking to me. She's like, okay, now you're gonna start counting from 10 to 1 on al revés. So I start counting, and I just remember the last number I got to was a 7. And from there, I don't remember anything until I woke up and I was out of the surgery. But I don't know how long I was in surgery for, and I don't know how long. I lost record of time between when I got to 7 and by the time that I woke up, because when I woke up, it was already sunset. So I don't know if it was sunset from the same day or if I went like a whole day sleeping and then I woke up the next day. And yeah, she tells me count backwards. I get to 7. I don't know what happens next. And she obviously never tells me that was the anesthesia, because otherwise I would have panicked. But now that I think about it, I'm like, oh, that was that. So I wake up, my head is all like, parezco momia, because my hair has like a band around my head. And I feel okay. And I remember, I don't think I've ever told you this, but when I get out of surgery, I don't know if it was, I think it was surgery. The nurse said that I kept calling my mom. I kept saying mom, 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 oh, ama, something like that. So my mom comes over and she's like, oh, ¿qué tienes? Or what do you want? And then my mom always laughs about this, because she's like, you asked me for your phone, you unlocked it, and you sent a text to somebody, and then you freaking knocked out again. And then she's laughing because I texted you.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I texted you, but I feel like in the back of my head, like all this shit was going on. And I feel like I wanted to text you to be like, hey, like I made it. And my mom laughs because she's like, dude, like, my mom's like, that's when I knew that she's like, okay, she's fine, because she's freaking texting, like, who the fuck like gets a brain surgery and is like, here, let me unlock my phone. Because I remember another thing too was they would say a lot of people would, after getting this surgery, you can forget how to walk, how to talk, how to drive. Like, a lot of people go like if they were a baby. So when my mom sees that, she's like, okay, like, she's okay. Because if she can unlock her phone, she's fine. So I did that. I passed out again. And as in passed out, I mean, like, go to sleep. I go to sleep. When I actually, like, realize that I'm out, I remember, like, I touched my head. And I was like, oh, shit, like, I have a momia thing, like, wrap my head. And the nurse comes in and she's like, oh, like, I can take off the venda off. And my first reaction, I was like, no, don't take it off. And she's like, why? And I was like, because I feel like this thing is like holding my head tight, and I feel like if you take it off, like, part of my head is just gonna come off. And she's like, no, like, you're stitched up, you're gonna be, she's like, I can take it off already. And I was like, no, don't take it off. And she's like, okay, if it makes you feel better, like, I'll let you keep it for right now, dijo, but I'm gonna have to take it off. So once she takes it off, I didn't even know they had, like, they had shaved off this part of my head, of my hair, like, from here, the middle part, like down to the ear. And when she takes off the venda, she's like, oh, like, te rapamos el pelo, like, right there. And then I see, like, what's it called? All the stitches, and I had 22. I was 22 and I had 22 stitches. So I see the stitches, and she tells me, like, oh, the stitches are eventually going to come off. Like, you have to keep him for, like, 2-3 weeks and then come back, and then they're going to cut him off. So after the surgery thing, I go in bed rest for a month, and the only thing I could do was get up, eat, and shower. I couldn't drive, I couldn't work, I couldn't do anything. Like, I just had to be laying, like, literally for a whole month I was just sleeping. And I was on all kinds, and I was on another medication that I couldn't drive with because it would make me drowsy. And I was basically in bed rest for a whole month, and then after that whole month I could, like, resume my regular activities. And I feel like I've always been, like, a very independent person, that I'm like, okay, like, if I want to go to Target and Angel doesn't want to go with me, like, I'm gonna still go regardless of whatever. And at this point, it's like I can't do anything by myself. Like, I have to have other people watching me and caring for me. So I just felt really, like, I don't know if to say vulnerable or very, like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it was so weird. I was just like, oh, like, stop babying me, because I'm not a baby. Like, I can do stuff on myself. And I hadn't drove in over a month. And for me, just to think about driving, it was me thinking that I wasn't going to be able to do it because of the last time I drove was when I was, like, swerving and all that stuff. So to me, to even think that I was going to drive again took me back to that day. And one day, me and my younger sister, we went to the store. And it was like a 5-minute drive away from my mom's house. And we're going to the store. And I told her, I was like, oh, I want you to let me drive. And she's like, no, mi mamá me va a regañar because you're not supposed to drive. But by this point, I was off the drowsy medication. And it was almost going to be time for me to do my whole routine by myself. So she's like, you know what? Like, I was like, let me do it because I need to get over the fear. Because I need to have somewhat of a normal life again. Like, I can't be relying on all of you guys to be taking me from point A to point B, because that's not the point. And she's like, okay, drive. So she drove to the store and I drove back, and I was like, okay, like, it's not bad, like, I'm okay, like, you know. And then after that, like, for a whole week we would go to a place and I would always drive back. And I feel like that helped me lose de no tenerle miedo to, like, oh my god, I'm gonna crash or this or that, or I'm not gonna be able to drive because of that. And yeah, and then after that whole month I went back to do my own thing, and then I went back to TJ because that whole month I was at my mom's house.
All right, babe. Well, before we end this, I know it's a long one, and we haven't got into, like, how I met your parents and all that, but yeah, I think that's a very crucial part of your life, and it's a very important part of your life, and I think the rest of it we can touch base. We'll have a second podcast. We'll have, sorry, Teddy was here. But we'll have a second podcast that way we can go into more details about your parents and stuff like that. But man, I when you first told me about that, when you were going, I guess into surgery, and when you were telling me that, even right now that you were saying that, it's just like, it's like, man, it brings tears to my eyes, because it's you realize how life is so vulnerable, you know. And one of the things is that, for instance, like, I don't know, like, well, now and I know we didn't get to talk about like, oh, your parents and all that, but the thing is that like, I don't know, like I just lost my dad not too long ago, and I still, thankfully I still have my mom, but I get along really good with your parents, and that's why I tell you, hey, you know what, let's hang out with your parents, and because at the end of the day, I feel like I used to have a lot of friends, but at the very end of the day, what really matters is your small circle, you know?
Yeah.
And I thank God that I have you in my life, and that your parents are really, really cool with me. And I really enjoy the time when we hang out together. But yeah, when you're in those situations, that's when you realize it's the little things that matter. And just to end this podcast, and that way we can end this conversation, I just want to say, Chelo, like, I'm very blessed and I'm very thankful for you. I really love you, and I'm gonna do whatever I can to always take care of you. Okay. All right. Anything else that you would want to say?
Don't stop crying. Before I came on this podcast, I told myself I wasn't gonna cry.
It's okay.
I think that how we're saying right now, we go on this journey of life not knowing when it's gonna end. You know, like we don't know when we're gonna die. And I feel like we should all, because even up to this point, we should all enjoy the little things, because when you're in that situation, everything that matters is like you want to do all the things that one day you're like, you said you hate. Well, maybe not hated, but the things that you do on the daily basis that you take for granted, like driving. You know, sometimes you're like, oh, like I gotta take a 5-minute shower. Like, enjoy that shower, enjoy the hot water, the cold water hitting on your face or your body, because from one day to another, everything's gone. And I feel like if you feel like you ever want to do something, just do it, because, you know, one day you can be gone and you're going to be like, I wish I could have done this or I could have done that, but now it's too late. And right now they're saying that about my parents. Like, I'm the type of person that I like going out, but you know, I'm like cozy vibes all the time.
Yeah.
And Angel and I were talking about that before he came on the podcast, because I'm like, oh, like, I don't know if I want to do a podcast, and I just want to watch a movie. And Angel was like, I want to do a podcast. And I told him, like, okay, let's do something. Let's do the podcast. And then once we finish doing the podcast, we can be like cozy vibes and watch a movie. And I feel like you have to spend the most time with your loved ones, because you never know how many memories you're going to be able to make with somebody. Like, you never know, knock on wood, if we have like 10 more movies to go and that's it. Yeah. Or like 5 more Christmases and that's it. Like, you never know how many of something that you guys do together have left. And I just say, like, I think the main thing for this podcast is to do the little things, to not complain about doing like the little things, because that's what matters the most. And yeah, we did have some questions that some people asked, but I think we'll just save that for next time. And well, Chelo, thank you for coming on to the podcast for the first time, and I think that story and that message, it's a beautiful message, and thank you. And I love you. Thank you. I love you too. All right. Bye, guys. Yeah.
No bye. Till next time.
Oh, till next time. Till next podcast.
Yeah, till next time. Never say bye. I'll see you later.
Okay.